You were made an assistant whip in 2005. Were you a bullying, blackmailing type, sir? What's the truth?
No, I certainly wasn't. I always used to take the view that if I talked to a recalcitrant colleague and I couldn't persuade them in about 2 minutes, that I wasn't going to persuade them. And what I would often do is actually either involve a friend of theirs to persuade them, or indeed get them to talk to a minister, and depending on how serious the matter was, up to the Prime Minister. And then depending on how serious the vote was, to actually just try and gently explain what the facts were. But what I do think is unacceptable, if it's true, is Christian Wakeford's claim that he was told that money would be withheld for a school in his constituency, because that is, A, using government money, and B, punishing his constituents, not him. And I think that is completely unacceptable.
Yes, I accept that. We had Nick Dubois on earlier saying that he remembers being in Parliament, but he would say no, and he would stand up. There's a feeling that it's all a bit, they're all a bit thin-skinned, these new intake, and it's very easy. I mean, you've said there that, quite rightly, if that was said to Christian Wakeford, that was unacceptable. So, Geoffrey, what you haven't touched upon is a man who was elected on a Tory manifesto crossing the floor on Wednesday with no respect or conversation with his constituents, and now he sits on the opposite bench. And this isn't about Labour or Tory. That's an appalling way for a man to behave, isn't it?
It is absolutely unacceptable. When I was a whip, I had to deal with one particular individual who crossed the floor. It is totally unacceptable. You're elected as a Conservative. He's the Conservative Member of Parliament for Bury South, and it is unacceptable. There are ways of dealing with what happened in the party, and he should have pursued that. But crossing the floor is quite unacceptable. And actually, it had the opposite. It had an effect, an unintended consequence. If the reports are correct, and I've no way of knowing whether they are or not, some of his new intake actually withdrew their letters of objection as a result of it, because they thought it was so appalling.
Let's talk about, you've been quite outspoken. What is the mood genuinely like in the Tory ranks right now?
Well, as a result of Christian Wakeford's defection and the Prime Minister's robust defence of Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, the mood was getting better. There was consternation yesterday about these bullying claims, because my colleague Will Wragg wouldn't have said the things that he said, I think, without some justification. So I think there is a culture in the Conservative Party that does need to be cleaned up. And I
Timing's quite interesting, though, Geoffrey, isn't it? The timing's quite interesting by William Wragg, isn't it?
I think the timing is coincidental in terms of there's frenzy within the party about these letters, and I think some people are behaving in ways that they shouldn't.
Coincidental is an interesting way to describe it. I'd say it was part of a concerted campaign. I'm interested in what you said as well, Sir Geoffrey, about how it's almost like Christian Wakeford's defection worked in Boris Johnson's favour. I thought that Keir Starmer overplayed it. I thought they didn't play it very well. And I must say, I did chuckle, I hope you did as well, when he made his first appearance as a Labour MP and introduced him as Sir Keith Lama, which we thought was very funny here on Talk Radio. One of the things I've been saying to Tory MPs for a couple of weeks is, out there in your constituency, I spoke to Mark Jenkinson in Workington yesterday. He said his constituents are still behind Boris Johnson. What are your constituents saying to you, Sir Geoffrey?
So I had a meeting last night with an important group within my association, and the picture is quite mixed. I think on the whole, the majority were supporting Boris Johnson, but there certainly were some people that were saying that he should go. So the picture is mixed in my constituents.
It's quite interesting. And I said it as well myself, I think partygate caused, quite rightly, so many problems for the Prime Minister and the government, because it resonated with people. People remembered not being able to go to a funeral or anything whilst they in Number 10 were downing drinks. But equally, in the last 7 days, Geoffrey, people have said, actually, lots of people broke the rules. I'm beyond that. I'm interested in the cost of living crisis. I'm interested in my gas bill. I'm interested in, getting back to work, my kids getting back to school. And that, I think, that there's a point where it'll be, what more? What more? I mean, you've been quite vocal against Boris. Do you think he survives? Do you think he goes? Is it about the May elections? Where do you stand on this?
So I think it's survivable. It depends a lot, which is why I haven't done any broadcasting much really since Christmas. It depends what Sue Gray's report says. and whether she says directly that he broke the rules. If she says, well, it was a general culture and, there's a fudge, I think then he's got to do several things. He's got to radically reform the way the Number 10 operation works. He's got to reform what happens in the party regarding this bullying thing, because these sorts of allegations are totally unacceptable against individuals. And he's got to start to deliver big policies for the country and demonstrate how he's going to deal with the very severe cost of living increases that are going to happen in April and May, and the tax increases and the local government elections, which are going to be very difficult. Now, if he can exercise good leadership and get through all of that, then I think we've got a good chance of moving on and really governing for the people of this country. If he can't do that, then I think he's in difficulty.
Just very quickly, a lot of people saying that they voted for a Tory government, not a Green one, and that Boris Johnson's, net zero obsession and his different agenda, spending money that we haven't got, has turned more Tories away. And they're now saying, very much like you, Sir Geoffrey, low taxation, sort out the cost of living crisis, end this Brexit, this COVID nonsense, and let's get on with our lives. My question to you is, why the hell didn't Boris and his friends do that from day one with an 80-seat majority? Because surely that was the way to govern.
Well, I think that we've got to have regard to the green agenda. There's no doubt about that. We've got global warming taking place.
Of course.
What I said in the 22 in a question to Alok Sharma the other day is we've got to actually have regard to what is happening elsewhere in the world. It's no good us making our people poorer, but the Chinese ignoring the rules and making their people richer. So I think that we are going to have a very difficult cost of living problem in April and May. And I think we've got to look at some of these green levies and perhaps span them out over a longer number of years so that we can reduce the impact of ordinary poor people who are not working or who are on low incomes, so that we can ease the problem for them.
Much to talk about, and delighted to have you on. One final question, 2 lines. Dominic Cummings?
Dominic Cummings, as you said, he is a spiteful individual. I would actually launch, if I were the Prime Minister, I'd launch a huge leak inquiry into Number 10 as to how these emails were leaked, how these pictures were leaked. And frankly, if he's found guilty, then he needs to be prosecuted.
I know that the main criticism is, and quite rightly will continue to be, why did you put him in there? But I repeat what I said, Sir Geoffrey. I find it unbelievable that an elected government could fall on the basis of the bitter rantings of a man sat in a dark room somewhere in London who lost his job. That's what I would say. Sir Geoffrey, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Talk Breakfast.